Show of hands of people who have heard of Ionic, played with it. Couple. All right. Cool. Well, tonight should be a pretty good crash course. We're gonna be covering Ionic 2, which I believe is official. If it is official, it's really new. If it's not official, it'll be coming out really soon. So these are all the new bits, and there's a couple of aspects that if you are not familiar with, say, Angular or TypeScript, there will be a couple of things in here that'll be a little kind of jarring on the eyes. What is this exactly? Unfortunately, we're not going to have time to dig into those topics. They're topics unto themselves, in which we will be covering this year as well. But what we are going to do is lightweight enough that you should be able to catch the drift of what's going on. So I don't think it'll throw anyone for a loop. So what is Ionic? For people who have never heard of it and people who have been kind of confused about what it is. So it is a front-end framework that leverages Cordova, Angular, and Sass. Who knows what Cordova is? Alright, good. So that's the next one. What is Cordova? And this gets a little bit confusing, and there's a few terms I want to get out of the way in the beginning here. So Cordova is a platform for building native mobile apps using web technologies, and that's kind of the core of what we're talking about tonight, is using the web technologies we all know and love to build mobile applications. And what Cordova is really the engine that is behind the scenes that packages the web app and makes it into a native application that runs on a phone. So you can kind of think of it as like 90% web, 10% native. Like it's just kind of the shell that runs a website essentially inside of the application. Cordova also provides a number of libraries essentially that will allow your website, and that's what I'll refer to it as. I'll just kind of herein refer to it as a website for the rest of the night. It allows your website to access features of the phone. So camera, geolocation, alerts, push notifications, these things. There are many features it can actually access on the phone. Not all, and we'll touch a little bit more on that later. So what's PhoneGap? Nobody actually knows what it is. And I put that in there as kind of a joke. So, and even my history on it is hazy. So if somebody knows, interrupt me. But I believe PhoneGap is what originally started, or was kind of the thing that was growing up. And what spun out of it was Cordova became an open source platform. It was taken over by like Apache. It's now open sourced. Anybody can contribute to it. And PhoneGap, I believe, is an Adobe product. And PhoneGap, in some ways, is a little bit similar to Ionic in that it leverages Cordova, but it also gives you some extra tooling along with it. PhoneGap was covered in our mobile shootout last year, which the video's online if you go back to the... What? Oh, you just did Cordova. Oh, my bad. My bad. We're not talking about PhoneGap tonight. In my opinion, Ionic is far superior to what PhoneGap offers, but maybe there's something I don't know. So the reason I put that in there is PhoneGap and Cordova, for all intents and purposes, are synonymous. So, why Ionic? Why this idea of these hybrid applications? And the answer to that is quite simple. If you've ever tried building a mobile app, if you're a web developer by trade, building a mobile app is not something that's easy. You have to use entirely new languages depending on what platform you're targeting. Something like Objective-C and Swift, Java are not going to be languages you work with day in and day out. So it's extremely hard, in my opinion, to do that. So you can use your web technologies that you can rapidly build things with. You look at an app and it's like, man, if I could do this on the web, this would take me a day. Like, it wouldn't be that hard. And so that's the idea behind this, using the tools we are familiar with to get that mobile app that so many people seem to want. So why not? If that's like this pie in the sky, holy grail of, yeah, we can use web to build mobile apps, well, there are some drawbacks. And the main drawback to this, at least in my opinion, is performance. The trained eye will be able to launch an app, a hybrid app, and see, that button looks just a little bit different. And when I scroll this list, it's got a little bit of like jankiness to it. And that's kind of the best case scenario. It can get a lot worse than that. It can be like a really poor performance because it doesn't have full access, to that phone's UI and all that stuff. Flexibility is another thing, and like I mentioned earlier, that you have access to a lot of features of the phone, but you don't have access to all of them. So one in specific is like a video player. If you want to have like full control over a video player, you can kind of do that on Android, but not on iOS with Cordova. And there's plenty of other features that you don't have access to, and you just don't have that raw power. So if you really need to have like best-in-class application, there's a chance that this might not be a good idea at all. But if you've kind of got run-of-the-mill type application and pretty standard needs, it could work out pretty well for you. So that's that. Some alternatives to Ionic. There's probably hundreds out there. This list I consider to be kind of the main alternatives. So we talked about Cordova, PhoneGap. And I've kind of got little notes next to these. Those are hybrid. And when I say hybrid, what I mean is that it's HTML, CSS, JavaScript wrapped up in a native application. Whereas React Native, if you're a big React fan, React.js, this is a little bit different beast. This still allows you to use a lot of features that you're familiar with. So JavaScript, CSS even, you can lay out things with Flexbox. And the difference between React Native and what we're about to go through today is that actually compiles down to a fully native application. So those drawbacks that I mentioned of performance and UI don't exist because it actually compiles down to the real deal. So that's the difference between hybrid and native. Xamarin is a really good alternative if you are a C# developer. It's a fantastic choice. Native script is all in JavaScript, and I think it is Angular 2 as well. And for all intents and purposes, that also is native, but there's some interesting features happening there. That was covered in the mobile shootout, so you can go back and look at that video. Framework 7's an interesting one, also hybrid. And Appcelerator, this really used to be a thing. I don't think it is anymore, but it's still around. I checked. They still have a site. They still have a sales team and all that. So these, what I want to mention about this is a lot of times people ask, which one do I choose? Which one's better? What is the perfect one? And honestly, there's no perfect one. And the best thing you can do here, I think, is pick the one that you or your team is familiar with the stack. So if your team is, hotshot React developers, you probably use React Native. Probably doesn't make any sense to use anything else. If you're a .NET shop, Xamarin probably makes perfect sense. So pick the one that the stack is most familiar to you if you are not going full on native. I think that's kind of the best choice, unless the need of the app outweighs that comfort level, because sometimes you just need an app that has really high performance and does all the native stuff that these things won't do. So, and there's other drawbacks to consider too, like you're using a framework, so that means you're locked into it. So if it doesn't do something you need exactly, good luck trying to make it happen, because it's going to be hell. So that's another reason. You just gotta be prepared to make concessions with it. So, okay, I've got, I think, maybe one more slide after this, and then we get into straight up code. So if you don't have Node installed, you will need that. That will bring along NPM with it, and this is how you install Ionic. Notice you also bring along Cordova with it because it needs it. It does take a long time, so go get a coffee when you run the install. And then, I don't know how well it's pretty white. There are, when you start an Ionic app, which we'll do here in a moment, there's 3 different kind of boilerplates you can start off with. One of them is blank. That looks really white. And then tabs, which has the very familiar tabs across the bottom, and then a side menu, so it's got the whole, little button on the left that slides out a side menu. And those are your starters. Today we'll be starting with the tabs one, even though we're not using tabs. I just kind of feel like almost anytime I started with a blank one, I've almost always grown into tabs, and it's kind of pain getting that in there later, so whatever. After you run install one of these, which you can't really see it down there, but anyways, it's Ionic Start, and then a couple of flags there. And then you CD into your app that you created and run Ionic Serve, and what that'll do is pop up a web browser that will be the app. And anytime you make changes, it'll live reload for you. So every time you make a change, it'll compile back down and refresh the browser. There will be some things, nothing that we're doing tonight, but there will be some features that just don't work in the browser at all, because like a push notification, right? Like you can set that up to get an alert, like a browser alert, but you're obviously not going to get a push notification, right? Just some of these things don't work. Accelerometer, not going to work on a web browser. But from what my experience has been, you kind of do like 95% of your developing and testing in the browser, and then when you're ready to test on the phone, there's another command that you'll run to get it on the phone. But most of it happens right in your web browser, same, debug tools you're used to, inspector, all that good stuff. So
with the same, so if it works in HTML5, is there a disconnect between the Cordova and actually implementation? So like we were testing the other day with using a camera on a phone with HTML5, worked really well.
Right.
Is that so?
Yeah, so camera would be one of those ones that's like, yes, you have a webcam, but it's not going to use, likely anyways, not going to use the browser's API to get your webcam. Right? No, so they're totally different beasts. So you did. Yes. Well, that's great. Oh, good. Yeah. I didn't expect that. So so you got camera on your phone and the browser, your computer's web browser.
No.
Okay.
So we got the camera
on the phone.
On the phone.
Yes.
Through the browser on the phone.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, sure. Yeah, it can access.
HTML5's got the plugin.
Exactly right.
So there's a lot of this stuff that's being turned on. Like every month, there's like more stuff in the phones that are being turned on in HTML5. So what I'm asking is are you seeing? Is there like a compatibility chart that shows what features are turned on for Android and iOS? If it works in HTML5, does it work?
I would say chances are going to be yes, and it's not necessarily that it's an HTML5 thing that works, but it's the fact that the phone is allowing access to these things. Cordova is probably way ahead of what the browsers are doing. So when Apple and Android allow these features to be accessed, Cordova probably had access to that a long time before Google Chrome figured out how to get access to it. So I would say anything that you can gain access to in your browser is a really good chance that you'll be able to get access to it through Ionic, and in a more robust way too, more than likely. So you'll be able to do more things with it than say the web browser will be able to. It is a weird thing, so we'll touch on that a little bit more here too. It's really interesting. Good question. Any other questions before we start digging in? All right then. Oh, this is gonna be a good one. Sorry, I gotta reset myself for a second. Yeah. That's good. Okay, so it was to start. We'll do Ionic Start. Throw a V2 flag on there. So the version 1 stuff is junk. It's dead. So just V2 it all the time now. We'll call our app QuickBid, and then the last parameter is the template you start off with. So I'll run this, and this will probably take a second here. While that's running, I think we can start to poke around this. Alright, I know that's pretty small. Sorry. It's really small. Okay, so there's a few folders. I just kind of wanted to get a good look at the structure because there's not much of it. This is the root of the application. You've got a source folder, your node modules, some resources. Source is where we're staying at, so that's pretty much everything. The www folder is where things compile out to, and that's what the app eventually ends up displaying in the end. But for now, we're sticking in the source. And really, there's only a few things I wanted to draw your attention to. In the app folder, there's a few things we need here, and one of the most important ones is app modules, which we'll see here in a second. When we create new pages and we create like service providers, we always end up going to app modules to essentially register that for the app. And I'm sure there's probably a better like design pattern than what I'll be doing to shoehorn it in there. But just know that it does need to get registered through the app, and that's where we'll do that. Assets is where you would. I don't even think you really need to use this, but this is where like your images and text files, JSON files, whatever, like just kind of your raw assets. Pages is where, well, imagine you're using a mobile app and you go to like the contacts tab or something like that. Every new page you go to, the way Ionic sets this up is it's actually a page. So think of it again like a website. When you're doing a real mobile app, you can't think of it in that way at all, but we're doing web here, so it feels a little bit more familiar. Under each page, I wish I could make these bigger, I'm sorry, there's a HTML file in here, SAS file, and a TypeScript file. So the way the pattern is kind of set up is each page gets one of these. Ionic has a generator that we'll use, and it'll stub this out for you. So it's actually pretty handy. It gives you everything you need to start with. You hop right in and start doing it.
Do you have to use TypeScript?
You do not have to use TypeScript. I don't think. Definitely in version 1 you don't have to. And what I don't know is how painful it would be to go against the grain of what they're doing.
Because that's the auto.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's... I can't imagine it forces you to, but... yeah. Oh, the only other thing in here is a tabs folder, and so it's essentially a tab view, and you'll see that at the bottom. And I'm kind of going to use, just by way of habit, probably some MVC terms, even though this is not MVC. I'll probably refer to the HTML file as a view, and I'll refer to its kind of, for the .NETers in here, kind of its code behind, like its class. I'll kind of refer to that as a controller, whatever. And it's just out of habit, so just FYI. And then theme is is where more of your SAS would go. They've got some pretty nice defaults set in there, a number of variables that you can go in and just change and kind of reset the look of the app really easily. But you do have full control over the styling of this because, again, it's just web. And Ionic's done a really good job of creating a really nice system that is easily overridable. So, and that's about the rest. Probably won't worry about the rest. Alright. Should be done here. Just above, it'll give you a couple. Yikes. A little too big.
Google search shows that they're not supporting a non-TypeScript option anymore. They were trying to, but they're not.
Ah. I'll be damned. It's a little surprising. TypeScript is nice, though, I gotta say. Okay, so a couple things here. It tells you to run Ionic serve, which we'll do in a second, but then you'll also see some other commands here. So run on a device or simulator is Ionic run, iOS, and of course you can run Android or browser. I will say I've had some issues with some of the iOS stuff. Hopefully won't have those tonight, but Android, from what I've seen, is pretty seamless. You plug your phone in, hit run, and it launches to it pretty easily. And having said that, we'll run Ionic serve. Or not. Change into the app and then run it. It's doing the compiling business via Webpack. And I'm going to do this. Really make it look like yeah, this will be good for now. Okay, so here is our app. We'll kind of shape it up more like a phone would be, right? if you have a keen eye, you'll notice some of these animations if you can see them. They're pretty light, but it really has that Android feel to it. One of the really interesting things about Ionic is how it will detect the device you're on and style it up based on that. So one of the things that was annoying about the first version is the Ionic has a number of icons that you can use. You know, like your Twitter Bootstrap has icons, and Glyphicon, whatever. This is called Ionicon. And the icons wouldn't change. So I think they looked iOS-y. I think they were like an iOS-based icon, but you'd have it on an Android phone, and it's like, I don't have my, it's kind of annoying. So now when you use them, you just use it like normal, and it will change properly depending on the device it's on. So I believe this does pick up an Android styling. I don't know if that's because they just default to that for anything that's not a phone, or if they defaulted to it because it's a Google browser. I don't know. But that's what we got. Pop open the code real quick here. So just a bit on editors. So I am going to use WebStorm. It's a JetBrains offering. If you didn't sign up when you got here, we'll pass that around at the end. We do give away a JetBrains license each month. There's plenty of other editors, but choosing your editor is an important choice, because when you're working with something like TypeScript, for example, there are certain features in a code editor that will make your life a lot easier. And we'll see some of those when we're using this. Really good options other than WebStorm would be Visual Studio Code. It is free. Visual Studio Community Edition, even better. Better by way of like working with the type system of TypeScript. And some other features, but Visual Studio Code's really lightweight. It's pretty nice, but it just doesn't have some of the same robust features that you'll see in here, like auto importing a library and being able to jump to like the declaration of a class. It's pretty nice features. Yep, that's that. So jump into our source directory, and man, this is a little small. Is it too hard to read here? This will pop up warning saying it's going to override code stylings because there's an editor config in here, and the first thing I'll do is change that to 4 space sizing, because that's the right thing to do. Man. Should have done this beforehand. Font size. 20? Whoa. Yikes. A little bit better? Alright. Sorry, I never think about that until I start presenting. Okay, so we'll jump into the home page here and just open up. So this is, for the most part, pretty straight up HTML. You will see some weirdness in there, right? Like the ion header tag. I don't remember that in the HTML5 spec. So we'll just change this to test. Come back out to our browser. Recompile, see the change. So I just wanted to show you that that does, a full live reload right there. These weird tags you're seeing in here come by way of Angular 2. They're components, and the component system is something that I want to talk briefly on before we move on. Ionic has a large number of components, and these are pretty much, think of any UI element that is native to your phone. And that's essentially what the components in Ionic are. So if you want, an alert box, or you want a button, or a modal window, or an arrow, all these things, they're all components to Ionic. And the documentation, which we'll see here in a little bit, is pretty good. You can preview what the components look like, and they offer sample code that oftentimes is good enough to just pop in your app and roll, which is pretty much what we'll be doing here in a little bit. So, yep, just kind of wanted to get that out of the way there. In fact, we'll do it right now. The documentation on Ionic is pretty good. I've seen a lot worse documentation before. So, under the components. Oh man, sorry, I forgot to explain what we're building tonight. So I've kind of got an obsession. You know how you have the ToDo List, the ToDo app? It's kind of the modern day hello world. Well, my ToDo app is something that I've built called QuipVid, and it is essentially a YouTube type website just for movie quotes. And so the reason I use this every time is because I've got a really simple URL endpoint that brings back a bunch of JSON data that has enough data for me to show one of you and then go to kind of a a parent list and then go down to a child. It's very fun, I believe, to work around with. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to hit the API here, get a list of all the videos, bring them back, display a list of them, click it, you'll go into the detail of it, and the video will be there to watch. And that will be what we build. So to start off with, we need a list. And I mentioned here that you can kind of get a preview of everything. So here's a good example of that. By default, it shows an iOS view, but you can switch it over to what the Android view looks like, and even Windows Phone, although I don't know why. What? Yeah. It's weird. It's surprising that they finally got it in there, like when it didn't matter, so whatever. So it's pretty cool. As you scroll down, you'll get like variations, of lists here. So there's a list with dividers, and as you can see, this looks very native-y, right? Like this kind of looks like the settings section. But what we're looking for is specifically, lists, thumbnail list. So this will kind of be what we're aiming for. Have a little thumbnail there, and then a button to click on to get to the detail there. And to the left is, again, a nice little code snippet. And for the most part, this mirrors almost directly to what you see on the right. Sometimes there's some extra fluff in there that you kind of have to inspect element on and get down to. But this is the component. So we'll just replace this content area with that. Reformat that code to space out properly. That image source, of course, is not going to work. So we'll grab the full path. Cool. Refresh. And that's the start of our list. So I can prove out as if like we would loop over it. Just like that. And we can pretend that it's kind of working, and we'll actually build this out for real. But that's how I kind of work. I just grab it, imagine as if I'm looping over it, make sure everything's there, and then make it all dynamic. Make sure I'm on track here. Cool. So the next piece is to fetch the data. Normally, when I'm doing a presentation, I'd just like throw this in like some convenient place, not even worry about how hacky that is. So I'll try and do one step a little bit better, at least tonight, and that is to create a provider. So Ionic has the concept of providers. Just kind of gives you a place to put logic that you're going to reuse throughout your app. And I mentioned the generators earlier, and we'll take a really quick look at the documentation. CLI down here and generate. I think there's really only two things you can generate: pages and providers. I imagine they might build out some more later, but so far that's honestly all I've needed, and it's really simple. It's Ionic G for generate, provider, and the name of the provider. So hop out to command line, new tab, Ionic G provider. And for lack of originality, we'll just call it QuipVid. And go back over to the editor. Refresh. And I've got a new folder in there called providers. And here's the TypeScript file that it generated. Pretty basic, but it gives you really all the stuff that you need out of the box, except for these damn comments. They are actually helpful. The first time you use it, it will give you a link to go to. It's like, what is this injectable? What do I do? Format it a little bit better there. So I love that by default it includes the HTTP class in there to use and injects it in there. It's pretty nice. So Where we at here? First thing I'll do is just change this console log to an alert so we can definitely prove that we're working. Now that I've got a provider in here, remember earlier where I mentioned you'd have to go to the app modules to basically include it in there. So under app modules format, there's a providers array down here, and this is one of those moments. Notice the last thing up here. Man, sorry. Yeah. Notice at the top, the last import declaration that I have is for a tabs page. So we're working with TypeScript here. This is a TypeScript thing. What I want to do is import the QuipVid provider. So normally, you would type that in first, or whatever you'd build and find out, oh shit, I didn't import it, whatever. So, and like if you have a decent editor though, it's automatically coming up for me, and when I hit enter, it automatically sets the import up there. So it's just those niceties that kind of makes you smile when you're doing this kind of stuff. So now QuipVid is registered, and if I'm not missing anything, I should be able to go to my home class or controller and format it and pass into the constructor here a private, we'll just call it API, and it'll be a type again of QuipVid, and it will automatically import it at the top there. And by doing that, hopefully I haven't missed anything and I get an alert by way of the provider. Yep, there it is. Sweet. So we know that our provider is getting hooked in there. We know it's getting registered. It's bootstrapped. It's ready to roll. So next thing I'll do. Okay. Cool. So I'm not going to manually code everything here. The next piece I'm going to paste in is just a little fetcher for us. So we'll make sure that we're in our provider, paste that in, and then I'm just going to set a variable up here. Set data. So data, just setting up something to throw data into. So this is pretty simple. If it has data, just return the data back so we're not fetching it multiple times. Otherwise, we'll return a promise that has all the content. So it will go out, fetch everything, and then when it's got it all, it'll push it back in to anything that uses this. So we'll also put, just for way of verification in here, this data length. So the first time we use it here, we'll just make sure we're getting things, how many objects are in there, just make sure it's working right. And actually, I'm going to modify this URL real quick. Whoa. Sorry, I saved the file and it reran in the browser, and I've still got that alert in there. So I just changed this, and I'm putting a page parameter on there so it'll only grab so many, and that's something we'll touch on a little bit later. 1 second. We'll remove that alert. Don't need that anymore. Excellent. So now back in our home. Make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah, okay. Quips. Okay. Set up another variable on here called quips. And in our constructor, just set it to null just to set it properly. So there are a number of events that fire in the loading cycle on this, and by just setting up a function with a proper name, it'll run that event. So ion or fire when the event does. So ion view did load, I think. Yep. If you've got a function in there called that, this will run, when it loads. And for this, we'll call this .api.load, and again, so this load right here is that's a function I wrote. That's not anything that's part of Ionic. So again, it's just that IntelliSense of the editor. So just trying to drive that home, I guess. It returns promise. So we'll get our data and set this quips equal to data. So when the view loads, it'll go out and fetch that and shove it into the quips variable up there. Then the next part we'll do later. So saving, and again, if I'm not messing anything up, hopefully we should get an alert of 20. Nope. So proving that it went out, fetch the results, and it's just telling me how many I have. So now I know that my quips is set up here with an array of that content. So now that I have that, I can go back to my view and change my Ion item here to do a loop. So ng4, this is a bug I noticed. I sat here and scratched my head for like 20 minutes trying to figure this out. Notice that I did ng4 and hit enter. Well, without that capital F, it will not work. So just remember that one. And I think, wow, I can never remember the syntax for this. Let quip of quips. Okay. So quips. Sorry. And you should see right there. I'm typing QI. It picks up that quips is in my home class, and this will let me loop over that. So I won't touch anything else here, and I should get 20 instances of this after the alert. So there's the 20 of them. So yes, we're confirming that we've got real stuff going on. Let's remove that alert. Don't need it anymore. Good to go. So back over here in home, I can now change all of this dummy content into real content. So quip.name. And this is something in TypeScript that you can get fancy and actually create like just a model that contains the structure of a response like this and get real typing on that. I didn't go that fancy though. So there's that, and an image. And so there, titles, names, images, all those things are coming back now. So we got things shaping up, looking like a real app. The next piece, though, is to get that view button working. So that will, that needs to take us to a new page and show the details of that. So to do that, we'll head back to our home piece right here, and we'll just call it go to quip, and that will receive the quip object. And I'm missing something. Yeah, okay. So this is something we haven't touched on much, and there'll be a lot of that. Up here, we've got our nav controller, and again, that is put in there. If you generate a page, that will get put in there automatically. So it's expecting that you're likely going to be working with a nav controller, and the nav controller is how you navigate to pages in your app. So with this nav controller dot push, and push takes a page and then any number of parameters you want to pass to that. Oops. Speaking of which, we didn't create our page yet. I'll comment that out for now. So we need our quip page. We have the list of them, but we need to set up what the page looks like that you go to. So back over here, we will run Ionic generate page, and we'll just call it quip. And back under our pages, we've now got a quip folder, and that has quip HTML, the Sass file for it, should you want to put your styling in there for it, and then it's TypeScript file, it's class. But now that we have that, again, let's go back to the app modules here and tell it to include quip page. And that's a naming convention, so if you called it quip, it will append page onto it, and it's just kind of the convention they roll with. And also include it down here. Save, good. And then in our home class, now we can come back here and put quip page in there. So you literally just give it that page class, and then you can pass into it any number of values that you want to. So now that that's there back in our view, we can set the click. If you've noticed the weird parentheses and asterisk up here, it's an Angular 2 thing. I honestly can't remember what they mean and what they do. I'm guessing parentheses are a function, but there are a couple weird ones, and we'll see another weird one here in a second. We should go to quip coming up, and we can pass in our quip that we're already looping through. So I have the context of that one. Add that in there. So hopefully when I click this now, it will go to mainly a blank page, I believe. Yeah, so there's nothing on there. This is what it generates by default. So when you run the generator, that's what you get. Now we should be able to prove, though, that in quip HTML, freaking comment, instead of just that title there, in theory, oops, sorry, one more thing first. Go to our quip class, and in here, let's format it. I'll create quip any, and in our constructor, notice that navparams is in there. So we've gone to the page and it's passing off data to it, and you get at that data by navparams. So this quip will be equal to this dot navparams dot data. That is where it shoves the actual data, but you can get plenty more information than just the data that you pass in there via navparams. But that should do it, and in here we should then be able to access quip.name, I think. There's the list, and yeah, so there's the name. So we've see now that we have access in there. So now that we have access, we can go ahead and mark up our content, and I've got a snippet for that here. So I'll put that here. Whoop. Oops, sorry. I thought I put a bunch of stuff in there, but I didn't. Sorry. Quip. Name. What's that? Oh, hey. Good catch. Okay, good catch. I think that's called views. That's a nice. If I would have set up a type system, I would know. And then I've got. We'll leave that off for now. Hopefully, I should get. Oh, sorry. So I've used a Ion card here, and it just kind of structures stuff up a bit nicer. So if I go in there, yay! So I've got content, and then the last thing I need is the video. So I kind of mentioned videos earlier, and this is kind of an interesting thing, and it plays into what you were asking about with the camera. There is a Cordova plugin for video player, but it only works on Android. And I don't know much about Android, so I don't, or do I even have the dev tools for it, so I don't know what you actually get out of it. But I have done iOS work before, and I know that the video player is really extensive. And it would be pretty surprising to be able to access all those features. But at one point in time, I swear that I tried this same stuff when I first heard about Ionic, and I could not get. My thinking was, I've got access to web, so I can just put a video tag in there, throw a source on it, and I'll be good. If I remember correctly, it did not work. But it does now, and it works pretty decent. So this is just straight up normal HTML5. Quit video, putting a poster on there, controls, setting a style on it, all that good stuff. Yeah, this is kind of the motto of my life. Let's see if the sound plays.
Reid Hoffman says, if you're not mortally embarrassed by the quality of your initial release, you've released too late.
Here we go. So again, this is all in a web browser, and we can expect that it will, hopefully work fine when we push it over to an actual device. And I think we're at that stage. So let me just make sure I haven't missed anything.
There's no way you can tell a customer, well, it works on iOS, so you have to buy an iPhone. It just doesn't work in the software world.
So like you're saying, say that again.
So if you're developing an app
Mhm.
like this, you would have to be very careful about what features you released. It would have to be the same on both platforms. So if it worked on one and not the other, you can't do that.
Absolutely. Yep. And so
That just doesn't cut it.
No, you're completely right. And that's kind of why this whole thing exists, right? So when you're dealing with native development, you've got iOS and Android pretty much rule the world, right? So you are either going to build two completely different apps, likely two completely different development teams, right? Skill-wise. Maybe not, but your efforts are going to be double or triplicate, right, to build these two different apps. So that's one of the main reasons these tools exist, is to try and reach that holy grail of, I built it once and it runs everywhere. Obviously, that's close to an impossibility, but I mean, we're getting there as much as we
We're
can.
better than we were 5 years ago. 5
Yes.
years ago, this was a huge issue. 'Cause
Absolutely.
You would build it and then it'd be like, you get like 95% there, and then like, oh crap, it doesn't
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. I would go as far to say, as tools like Ionic, you better be sure, like you said, you've got to be sure that they work. And honestly, the whole cross-platform like pipe dream is just that. The likelihood that it's going to work so well on both is very, very low. When it does, great, it's awesome. But the reality is that, good luck. Yeah. And especially some, Cordova and stuff is as mature as it's become. It's still very experimental. I mean, you're doing some weird stuff. So, you got to be careful with that, because that's not going to fly. Yeah. Too bad. You have to get an iPhone to do it, right? Like, that's correct. It's not going to fly. Cool. Well, let's run this on. So I was going to deploy this to my actual phone. And of course, I go to do that today as I'm preparing and prepping and all that good stuff. And my iPhone is now running too new of a version than my Xcode is expecting. So I have to update Xcode. And no way was I about to do that before I was presenting. So we're just going to have to deal with the emulator. Ionic emulate iOS. Sometimes the first time I run this in a project, it does something weird. Yeah, looks like it's gonna work. Good. Wait, is time literally standing still now? All right. At least the second hand is. Oh, come on. Taking this time.
So while we're waiting,
Yeah, please.
syntax, I mean, it's Angular 2 syntax.
Yes. Yep.
So basically, if you're an Angular developer, you can read this.
Just right up your alley. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's just learning a couple of Ionic things and you're ready to roll.
TypeScript is a little bit of the hurdle.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Honestly, the
Yep.
first time I ran a full TypeScript
Yep.
project, it felt really weird at first. I had a day into it.
Yeah.
Old hat. It's JavaScript.
Mhm.
You start to think this TypeScript thing is like, oh god, my JavaScript is all weird now. No, it's really just kind of a new syntax on top of some JavaScript.
Yep.
But it's still
And
JavaScript.
you can actually throw JavaScript.
Yeah, I mean, it is JavaScript. So,
You just turn off all your compiling.
Right. Come on. Yeah.
This might be a silly question, but
No such thing as a silly
do
question.
I have to still pay for the iOS developer tools to deploy?
No. Well, it's okay. Oh, hang on. Hold on. To deploy to the
App Store?
App Store, yes.
Yeah.
You use, good Lord.
Realize when I
Hey,
put it on my phone at home.
no longer have to pay. So that used to be a thing.
They've got the, yeah, you talk about the Ionic.
Well, there's that too, but Apple no longer requires you to have a developer account to run on your own device.
Oh, nice.
Yep, they used to, and I think it was within the last year they lifted that. But obviously, to get it into their test suite and things like that, yeah, you'll need a developer account. But just to sideload it on your phone, good to go. Mm-hmm. I wasn't really paying attention to the warnings, so I don't know what that was about. But yeah, here it is, running on the old iOS. Go here, and that's a real video, man. It's pretty cool. Yeah, so there's one more thing that I wanted to cover here, and that was the first time that I built with Ionic. I was doing this exact same thing. I wanted a list of videos and I wanted to play them. And the first thing that I noticed, so I've got 20 videos right here, but when I pulled down 700 videos and I went to go scroll, it was the worst thing ever. It didn't even work. It wasn't even usable. It was just stuttery and janky and just terrible. And so Ionic has realized that. And the way that lists work on a mobile device, your Facebooks, your Twitter, as you're scrolling just infinitely, it's pretty advanced the way that it works. It basically will only keep in memory the things that are in view, and everything else that's out of view, it DQs that out of its memory. And so if you don't do that, you end up with the same situation as we experience here on Ionic. And so what I want to do now is close this down and come back to the service here and take that page parameter off and pull all these bad boys down. I'd heard they had addressed this, right? So I was very excited to test it out again. And so in the browser, it's still pretty good in the browser. I can flip through that pretty good. Feels nice. Awesome. But let's run this over here again. If there's any questions while it builds, let me know.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about there's so many different device sizes. You're still gonna have to do responsive style.
Mhm.
So is it you just do it the same way
Yep.
with media queries? And
Exactly right. Yeah. So the components in Ionic, they're all pretty well set up. They are going to work wherever. In fact, I'll try and turn that on here a little bit. By default, it disables orientation. So when you change this, your view doesn't move, you have to turn it on in Xcode. But it will expand to whatever. So, case in point, the browser. So it does work. Obviously, that's not an ideal look, but it works. But any of the custom stuff that you do yourself, yeah, it's old hat. It's just media queries, and it very much works. It's nice.
you might actually have to take the font size down or something for really small.
Yep. And yeah, it's. I love when that happens too, because I do quite a bit of iOS development and some Mac OS development as well, and it amazes me how hard some things are. If I could just use CSS, this would have been done 10 weeks ago. It's just terrible. And then anytime I'm working in Ionic, yeah, I can style the hell out of this thing. It's awesome. Okay, so it may not come across, there goes a little lag there. Let me try and get it really going here. It's hard because when you're using the emulator, you got to do the click and then swipe. But if I really get going with the scroll, I don't know if you can see the jank there. It really slows down. It starts and then it just starts to get all jumpy and gross. So when I first saw this, I was really upset because I had heard they had addressed it. No, I thought the lists were all awesome and hot now. There is one little trick, and I just want to show it to you real quick. I didn't save it. All right, hopefully I can remember it. Home. So on a list, you set your list to a virtual scroll. Who said that? Okay, yeah, I was like, somebody knows about it. And in fact, I believe it's in brackets. Again, I don't remember what all these this Angular 2 syntax means. But here I would set quips, and down here I let quip and call this a virtual item with one of those guys.
Do you put capital S on the scroll?
Probably. Let's double check. Probably. You're probably right.
When you were first typing it out, it
Okay.
capital
All right.
S.
Good deal. Good deal. Good eye. Make sure it works in the browser. Make sure I didn't flub it. Yep. Okay. We're good. So I think I can't tell the difference in the browser. Like, the browser's pretty good, so there might be a difference. I'm not sure. But when we run back over here, while that's building, I will say one thing. Tom briefly mentioned it earlier. Ionic has a lot of other services, and they have a cloud service that does a number of things. Like, it'll give you really easy access to implementing push notifications, analytics. I think bug reporting is in there. Pretty cool services, and one of them is a way to have other people test your app before pushing anywhere. So if you want people to test it, it is as easy as running Ionic upload, and if you have a cloud account, it will upload it to there and give you either a 6-digit code that you can pass to somebody and tell them to go download the Ionic View app, and all they got to do is open that up and punch in that 6-digit code, or from the command line you can also run Ionic share and type in their email address, and they'll get an email that says, Myke wants to share this app with you. Go download it, and it'll load that up in there. And when they launch the Ionic View app, it'll list apps in there that have been shared with them, and they can launch the app right from inside of there.
That sounds like an awesome way to do ransomware.
Yeah. So it's super handy. You don't get access to all. There's a couple of features that don't work. Like, I think push notifications don't work, right? Because it's not its own app. And to register for push notifications, you need to have an app that calls out to Apple service and does that.
One of the things I remember is when you start doing Ionic development, you'll find there are a lot of plugins out there that you want to pull in that you'll use, like for Bluetooth stuff or
Yep.
for things like that. The cloud piece doesn't support a lot of plugins. There's kind of a base set that it supports, but
Yeah.
there's several that you won't get access to in that framework.
Yep. I think it's something like 25% of the plugins are supported. So if you want to share it legitimately, then you need to have a developer, at least for Apple, you need to have a developer account, and then you would take your app. We haven't looked at it yet, but this thing builds an app. Like, I mean, it's there. From there, you would upload it into Apple's tools and share it out from there, or there's third-party systems you can use as well. So hopefully this thing, oh man, scrolling like a champ. Ugh. So yeah, it'll scroll through thousands of results seamlessly. So I was happy when I found that again, because that was like the biggest complaint people had about Ionic, and they fixed it. And they essentially mimicked the same type of design pattern that is happening on real mobile devices for lists. So that's about all I had to go through. I had some other things I was hoping to get to, but time will not allow, I believe. So questions? Closer one first.
So I hit on that ransomware. That's send this to. I can just see people like, hey, send this over to all the developers at O'Reilly that we just got it, and have them see if we can do something with security. What
So
do you know about the security with this?
Yeah, same thing. Business as usual. So let's say you want to access microphone, camera, contacts, any of this. If you access those, it's going to prompt you, do you want to allow access to this? It's not as if it's magically just going to be able to like crawl your phone to do this. And also there's a concept called sandboxing with applications. So like an app through the App Store is sandbox, and by way of that, it's not going to be able to get access to things. So when you run something in Ionic View itself is sandboxed. So you have every bit of security as any other app would. It's going to be pretty hard to be malicious in there. Not to say that it's impossible. I don't know. Nothing's impossible, I suppose.
There's no big holes or anything.
No.
Or anything.
No, I don't think so. I can't think of any. So
So,
on this, since it's not native, is there something like Crashlytics or something like that you can use to trace back errors or crashes on user devices?
Yeah, so definitely. I'm not sure like what the official approach would be. So Ionic Cloud might have that in it itself, but also remember that this is a native app. So when I take a look over here, platforms, iOS, like there's my Xproj, there it is. So if there is a crash by way of like the app crashes, you could very easily open up, the app delegate in there, and generally that's where those like crash programs like write in your app delegate, and you just put a hook in there, and it'll pick up any crashes and report it back. So you can totally open that up and throw that in there. But that's not to say there wouldn't be like a different kind of crash, right? Because it's a website, so that could crash in many different ways than like a native app would, right? Like if you get a bad response back, right? Well, the app's not going to crash, but certainly there are other third-party tools that you can catch that. Again, we're just dealing with web, so think what you would do in any other like JavaScript type app if it crashes and you need to report that. That's actually kind of a benefit in this sense because you can use other tools in here that you wouldn't be able to use otherwise in a native app. So yes, there's definitely ways, but since it's not going to crash, there's potential for it to crash in other ways than a purely native app would. There'd be some extra things you'd have to think about of how to catch that. Yep. There's a question back there somewhere.
Yeah.
So.
This is purely an aesthetic question. If you go back to the simulator, I just noticed the list looks like it has quite a bit of margin inside.
Yeah, I noticed that too. So
is that like a known thing, or you just want to address kind of the visual difference between what you might expect on the web and compiled?
So I actually think that there's more. No. I don't have. No, there is more padding. I don't have an answer for it. I noticed that too. I feel like the first time I launched it, maybe it didn't have as much padding. I don't know if it was the different kind of list that I put on there. I don't know. But the first time I noticed it was this time when I pulled it up, so I don't know. Valid question, though.
I'm just going to reveal that I don't really know what's going on with this question.
None of us do.
So, of everything that's up there, all that content, so what does the application actually get from the web versus what's actually on the device?
Yeah, so it's easy to think about, and I think I understand what you're saying. It's easy to think that...
So you have a bunch of HTML and CSS and stuff in the application.
Right.
But then videos are obviously not.
Yep, correct. So it is kind of easy to think about this thing as like, it's a website, like hosted somewhere. First of all, think of the Cordova. Think of it almost as like a local web server. So like it's hosting up this site for your phone right now. So it's not actually pulling in, like the stuff that you see here is not pulling from some remote server. However, in reference to the videos and say those images right there, that's the same as referencing, like let's say you're building a website and you reference an image on like Google Images. It's just pulling it down. Yep, just like, yep. So those things are remote. I mean, yep, those are not local to there, but like all the CSS and the JavaScript and all that, that is essentially being for all.
That's what sets it apart from like those like different wrappers.
But you could just easily have images and videos and things like that stored on
locally.
the device.
Yes.
And serve those up as well.
Yep. I think, and I don't know if this is where your head is at all, but I remember the first time I heard about these ideas and I didn't really know much, and I hear other people ask questions like this. It's as if they think like this is a website hosted somewhere else that's being pulled into the phone, and that's not the case. But you can either have your assets, images, videos, things like this, probably even CSS assets. Pretty much any asset you can have on a website can likely be pulled in and referenced from a remote source.
But if it's constantly new every day, you want it out.
Right. And so the data that I'm pulling is just data that holds the information of where that's located. So that JSON dump that I pulled down looks like this. Like that's what comes down to my app, and so that image that I'm pulling is actually coming from S3. But I could just as easily store that inside my app. My app would be huge, so it's just kind of pulling it up as it needs it remotely. Yep, cool.
So is it actually translating this into a native app, or is it actually running a container for the HTML?
It's running a container is what's happening.
So it is executing HTML in the container.
Yep.
So you were talking about some of the other ones that were on the screen, and they were actually translating into an app.
Correct. Yep. So
What is there an advantage between the two?
Absolutely.
One or the other?
Yep. So the advantages are going to come from performance, from way of having a lot more access to things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to access through the web. Kind of back to your question earlier of I was able to access this from a website. Well, when you're doing a real native app, you can access everything on the phone, right?
So if you were going to do something like a ROM emulator in JavaScript, this would be the thing to choose, right?
If you are going to do a ROM emulator in JavaScript, yes, this would be the thing to choose.
But
Yeah.
just as an example, because it's a container and it's going to all run.
Mhm.
You don't have to worry about anything native at that point. Right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I don't know what the performance is going to be like, but it will run in theory. Yes. Yep.
Do you know if there's any good tooling for like getting the console log from the native app running? Like so when you're testing in a browser
Uh-huh.
and you get errors,
Yep.
you see them in the browser.
Mhm.
Is there a good way to hook into that log from the native?
Don't quote me on this, and I'll try and pull it up here, but I do believe that a console log will log, like if you open up Xcode and debug the app, a console log from JavaScript, I believe, comes out in the console in Xcode.
You can also open up Safari developer tools and then map it to the.
Yeah, but if you're debugging on a device, like if you have a device and you want to launch it through Xcode, I'm almost certain that console log comes out through there.
On Android though, you can pull up like a Chrome debug tools and debug the stuff that's running natively. So you can actually stop code
Yeah.
on the device
Yep.
on your browser on a PC per se. I know that's true on Android. I don't know about iOS.
I spent like 2 hours trying to figure out a problem. I would love to know that.
Yeah, debugging is actually pretty cool on Android. I just don't know what the iOS.
Yeah, it's
side
really
is.
cool. In Chrome, you can just pull up the Android device emulator
Yep.
and run it.
Yeah, but you can actually pull the app up on here, and then in my browser on my computer, pull up the debugging tools and stop code and inspect everything on the website.
You can keep asking questions. I'm curious. I feel like I remember this working. I'm like, hey, nice.
Do you feel confident selling in the Ionic app to someone, or is it just for personal use right now? Is it stable enough?
Yep.
Is it easy enough to develop in?
There has not been. So first of all, the number of times I've had the opportunity to build an app professionally is pretty small. Of those times, there's not one that I've said, Ionic's the way to go. Like I feel confident in it. No.
What have you felt confident in?
It's first of all, it's great for prototyping. Fantastic.
I mean, like what?
Oh, like what? Like other tool? Xamarin is probably the most robust that I've seen, and probably the one that I would feel the most comfortable. And
What if you don't know .NET?
people really like React Native, but I've also
But how is React Native any more proven than?
it's not.
That's what I
Yes,
was
I was saying.
wondering.
I feel confident in Ionic.
The only way that it's more proven is by way of performance. So that's like the biggest thing with Ionic is like, it just feels
Do they need to be, do they need like top-notch quality or not?
It just depends. Yeah. So it just depends. Like if it's not a client or not a product that really needs top end, Ionic's probably going to be a pretty sure bet. But your React natives and those things are definitely going to get you that performance gain out of it. So
It makes it feel better. Cordova's been around forever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this runs off Cordova, so, I mean, all that's different really is the...
And that's what I feel like people probably do sell Cordova apps.
Oh
all the
yeah.
time.
Oh god.
yeah, Ionic has a list of apps that are in the marketplace built by them, and some of them are incredibly impressive. So especially if you put some TLC into building it, I think you can get something pretty solid. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm on the hunt.
All right. What's up?
Wait, does your app automatically like call home to Ionic? Is there
Uh-uh.
any stuff?
No. If you include their Ionic Cloud stuff, Yes, because it'll report analytics and stuff like that, but by default, no.
By default, it's pretty silent. It doesn't try to reach out.
Not a single instance.
Okay.
Yep. Not at all.
We're
Yeah.
talking about web wrapper versus native app stuff, performance trade-off. Just in that small example, can you talk to how much of that is like native app Chrome, for example, the back button, the tab at the bottom, and how much just like looks like it, but it's actually carefully styled HTML?
So, for example, the app that we built tonight, none of it is native. Like all the back buttons, the list of everything, there was nothing in there you saw that was native besides like the time bar at the top.
Right.
Yep. And, oh, sorry, I take that back. The video was actually a native video player, and that's the same video player you would see on a website. So technically that is a native because, yeah. But otherwise, I would say this app that we built today is 98% hybrid. It's all web stuff.
Typically, the native stuff that you're going to get is when you're using services that the device offers. The emulator, the accelerometer, the camera, Bluetooth. It's when you're accessing those device-specific things is when you get into the native kind of libraries that
Right.
pass you through.
Yep.
But display-wise, it's almost always HTML.
Yep.
Just
And-
another question though, which is how much of that stuff do you have access to that you would never have access to on a normal web browser, like accelerometer, for example, which might tempt you to just straight up build a native app?
Say that again? Sorry.
How much of those phone features, like accelerometer or Bluetooth, which are never available in a pure website on
Right.
the browser,
Mhm.
could you use in an Ionic app?
Oh, quite a bit.
Or is it gonna require you to actually build a native app and just forget the whole
Check it out.
web integration?
So under native is a list. 3D touch, action sheet, ad mob, app rating, versions, badges, barcode scanner, battery status, Bluetooth, brightness, calendar. I mean, like, there's an extensive list of things you actually have access to. The file system, Facebook that's like, integrated into your core there. File paths, flashlights, geolocation. I mean, there's a lot. Keyboards.
Location, Facebook, Bluetooth, those are all things you have access to through HTML though. Yeah.
Sure.
Sure.
I mean, right, yeah. Well, but
So file system, all access, but
file system from a phone? I don't know. Saving? Like,
what's that?
interesting. I wouldn't have thought that, but
Yeah, you can save your equip list down, save your images down,
Yeah.
cache that stuff off.
Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Hmm. Local storage, but I mean, that's a browser. It's not your actual file system, but that's interesting. Sure, yeah, there's going to be a lot of this you can do in a browser, but like,
Touch ID, fingerprint scanning.
yeah.
For both?
Yeah,
I saw
there's
for
a-
Android.
It's on here too.
There's a version of SQL that they may have actually removed that. They may have actually been deprecated at this point for something else, I think, but it was there. There's a whole bunch of the stuff that is there.
Yeah.
Battery though, no.
No, there's
Power management, no.
going to be a large number of things in here, and you really get back to, are you building an app or are you building a website? Because if you're building an app, there's a lot of things you want. Like, you want to tell your customers to go to the app store and download it. You don't want to say, go to suchandsuch.com and bookmark it and save it and like do these weird things, right? Like, so are you building an app or are you building a website? There's no doubt that Cordova plugins are going to outweigh the number of things that the browser has access to. But if you're building a website and it has access to the things you need, well, you probably don't need an app then. Yep.
Mike, to that point, if you were building something where you, say, had a web site
Mhm.
and you had your app and you wanted them to feel and look the same,
Mhm.
how much sharing is there, or do you basically build two things?
Yeah. So, I mean, clearly, as you saw, we were running in the web there. You probably don't want your website looking like that.
Right.
So, I don't know. I've never gone down that path.
Like,
But
is there any reusable components, or do you basically build two versions of everything?
my interpretation of it, my opinion of it, would be you're likely building two different things.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, when you're using something like TypeScript, there's probably some sharing that can happen there, right? So the calls that happen, they're all Angular, so you can share. If you architect it in such a way, you can share some of your logic and structure and models and stuff like that. But as far as like your
Let's say
your
you
UI,
had some charts you
Mhm.
liked, and some stuff like that's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah,
Some painless stuff that you might.
it's gonna be. There's definitely some clever architecture that could happen to make sharing a thing, but it's gonna be. You'd be hard pressed to like make it just this very seamless and easy thing to do. It would take some interesting tricks, I think. Yep. Yep.
You figure you've got access to the HTML page through your Ionic app.
Sorry, what?
Same thing that you use for a website. Your Ionic app made an HTML page.
Oh yeah, totally.
You need an HTML page for your website.
Yeah, I could take exactly what's there and throw it up on web.
Using Media, you've already changed your settings. Yes. Same thing, and the only thing you have to change your CSS.
Yep. You probably don't want it looking like a really large mobile app, though, right? When you're on a desktop and you're on a 27-inch screen, there's significant restyling that's going to need to happen to make it feel like a real website as opposed to a really big mobile application. But if if it's basic enough, yeah, you could just take exactly the output and override some CSS, be like flip this over here, do some stuff here. But in all reality, it's probably not going to be practical.
How quick are they to keep up with the latest versions of their platforms?
So from like a UI standpoint, or more like plug-in phone interaction.
So like iOS 10
Yeah.
has a whole list of new features. Do they come out quickly?
Honestly, I don't know. So it's going to be Cordova that does that too. So Ionic is just pulling in Cordova stuff for that. And I would think that Cordova's pretty well on top of it. I feel like I remember seeing things like the fingerprint pretty quick after that came out. But I honestly don't keep on top of it very well to know.
Gotta kind of pick and choose sometimes of what to do first.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess, I mean, real quick, where's the, I guess, not related to that, but like, where's the hook for this, for Ionic? Who maintains it?
Who maintains Ionic?
Like, why does it, like, who makes it work? Keeps it?
Yeah, so they're pretty. I mean, I don't know their names. There are two dudes who constantly put out like video tutorials and stuff like that. So they are like pretty active in maintaining this, and they got on top really quick with Angular 2 and TypeScript. So like they're kind of on top of their game right now. But as far as who they are and like the longevity of it, I don't know. It's been around for a few years now, and every time I look into it, they keep advancing significantly. So there's that, if that's anything.
It's
But
not open source.
no, I don't think so. I don't think it is open source. Hell, it might be. I don't know. They are making money now, though, with their cloud services. So they're pushing that stuff pretty hard, and it's pretty nice too. There's several other things that we didn't talk about. There's a desktop app that will maintain a list of your apps. And it's called Ionic Labs, and right there you can launch it in like all 3 devices and like all these different orientations and kind of look at it right there. It's pretty sweet. So they're decently impressive. See if this will run. I don't know if it will. Bark at me. Good night. Let that run. See if I get a console log out of there. Curious. Yeah. He was giving me some fits earlier, and I started to install the new version, and things are a mess now. No! It did that earlier though too. This is a small thing but pretty cool. That splash screen right there, and the icon that you would see on the home screen. They've got this sweet service. If you generate an image that is of a specific size, there's one command line that will upload that to their server, and they'll resize everything and spit it back down to the app, and include all the assets in there for you. So that's, again, it's the little things. All sorts of logging. Where's my ASDF? Oh, good lord. I don't see it. I don't know. Sorry, there's too much to take through. Who knows? Anyways, sorry. Other questions? Cool. coming up soon is going to be a couple of you.
It logged.
It did? You saw the...
Yeah.
So just a second ago.
Oh, yeah.
Now you have to search for it.
Dang it.
Filter.
Oh, yeah, filter. Oh, yeah. Ah, there it is. It's funny. So you get some basic logging out of there, which is console log. It's freaking interesting. Okay, so coming up is some of you have emailed me. I need to follow up with y'all. We are going to do another shootout style session with JavaScript frameworks. The likely candidates are going to be React, Angular 2, Vue, and maybe one other one. Not sure yet. Maybe Ember. Maybe we'll get some Ember in there. Do a 4-way. So that's going to be coming up. Hopefully, I'm thinking maybe in March or April. Maybe February. I don't know. Something else we have coming up is Charlie Rosenberry covering web VR. So virtual reality in the web. And I think that's about all. If anyone is interested in presenting and you have a topic you want to talk about, come chat with me. I'd love to get some people up here spreading the good word. So other than that, that's pretty much it for tonight. We'll be hanging around here for a little bit longer. And thanks for coming. We'll see you guys next month.